All right. Good evening, everybody. Matt Geary for the Geek Pride cast on this Sunday evening. With me tonight, we have some usual faces and another special guest. First up, we have Peter Ray Allison.
Good evening, everyone.
We have Mark Canty. Mark? Yeah, it was just going too well, starting too early. Mark. He's not, yeah, something's happening with Mark. I will. It was going too well and yeah, well, there you go. We'll, he's doing the whole, I can't hear you thing. Anyway, we'll move on to our guest until Mark sort of figures out his audio. And with us, special guest is Adrian, and hopefully I get this right, Tchaikovsky?
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Okay. Adrian, for everybody who has not heard of you and your prolific writing, can you explain...
Have I lost my audio again?
Yeah. Yes, you have. Wow. Yeah, we were all going on at the start about how pro this was, and how we were starting early and everything was great. And then, anyway, Adrian, tell us a bit about yourself. So, who are you? What do you do?
Okay, well, I'm a science fiction fantasy writer. I've been going for about 14 years now. I am almost certainly best known for my novel of a few years back called Children of Time, which is basically about enormous hairy spiders in outer space. I have written other things, many of which also contain spiders in various proportions. My most recent book out is Doors of Eden, which came out in the middle of this year, which is to do with cryptid hunting, parallel universes, speculative evolution, and the end of the universe.
Wow, jam packed then. And we've got a message from Mark saying I can hear you through Facebook and not things. Well, that's useful, Mark. Anyway, okay, so where to start? Why the hairy spiders? Why the big spider obsession then?
Oh Lord, I mean, I used to have this very, very clever sounding answer about the long tradition in literature of using insects as a mirror for human nature and sort of Pelevin's life of insects and metamorphosis and all that sort of thing. But basically, it's because I really like spiders and insects and basically animals that most people don't like. I think that it was, I mean, I was, as a lot of us were, a fairly disaffected child. And honestly, I think I came to that as sort of, well, these things are also similarly sort of on the fringes, therefore I will take them on and adopt them as my sort of totem and my tribe and sort of identify with them. And I, even when I was a kid, you know, when I watched Star Wars, I watched Star Wars for the aliens, and the more kind of reptilian or bug-like or weird the aliens were, the better. And you know, I loved, oh god, there's a film, a Roger Corman film, Battle Beyond the Stars.
Oh yes.
Which is basically Magnificent Seven in space, except one of the Magnificent Seven is a great big lizard man. And although it sounds trivial, that was a huge education for me and an enormous influence on my storytelling, because it basically says, yes, here is a monstrous creature which is also a hero in the story. And that basically the idea that yes, you are allowed to do this was a huge you know, it had a huge impact on me and has very much kind of guided me where my writing.
You talked about Star Wars, obviously. David Prowse died today, which was very sad. Have you ever met him?
I don't think so. You know, it's entirely possible we have been at the same convention, maybe one of the SFX weekenders or something like that. But I don't, you know, the gap between kind of film celebrity and book writing is enormous in that kind of thing. So you don't generally get to kind of cross the borders unless you've got some sort of pre-existing contacts.
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times, and I was lucky to interview him once. And what an amazing guy! It's absolutely, I'm absolutely gutted. It actually affected me quite a lot because what makes me sad? Have you ever seen a documentary called I think it's on Netflix called I Am Your Father? and it's a documentary about David Prowse and how he was shafted, about being, he was basically replaced as Darth Vader, and he was banned from conventions and things like that, because of alleged dropping of the "Look, I am your father" storyline from Empire.
Oh no!
Yeah.
I was vaguely aware that there had been a falling out. I wasn't aware that was what what was claimed.
That's it. So basically, they say he gave it away, and he denied it until his death now. And there was even people who came out in his defense and said, he didn't. He was meant to have leaked it to the press and stuff, and there's even the press basically said no, he didn't. But he got barred from all the main sort of Star Wars conventions and stuff, and he didn't even get his last. He didn't even get to do the last sort of scene in Jedi, where obviously Luke takes off the helmet, and they reshot it for him so he could do that, and it never saw the light of day because it got shown once at a convention. And then Lucasfilm at the time, they basically put a kibosh on it and went.
Oh, I had no idea.
I
just assumed that had always been Sebastian Shaw for them.
Yeah. Well, it was Sebastian Shaw, but they filmed the crew who did the Netflix documentary. They shot it for him, basically saying that he deserved to have some effectively FaceTime because he'd always been sort of, this. Towering figure with no sort of voice, because James Earl Jones also did his voice, but they did the scene for him, and they got stand-ins, and they showed it at a convention, and that was it. It got sort of shut down after that, so he never got his sort of his moment with his helmet off, which was slightly sad. Anyway, sorry, it was a bit of a segue because you mentioned Star Wars and stuff. So, the sci-fi thing in the writing. Now, Pete told me that you used to work in law. So, did that sort of kind of was it writer first, then law, or was it the sort of while you were doing law?
I mean, I got published a long time after I got into law. But I got into law through a very weird channel, specifically because of the writing. Because I was trying to get published for a long old time before I actually made it. Specifically, I ended up at when I came out of university. After a while on the dole, I had a succession of terrible jobs, ending up at the Legal Aid Board.
Right. Okay.
Which was not a terrible, which was a perfectly fine job. It's the first decent job I had after a number of real stinkers, and that kind of woke me up to the idea that actually there is a whole legal thing here, and because the Legal Aid Board basically didn't have any kind of structure for advancement. It was basically everyone was down at the bottom, and then there were some managers at the top, but there was nothing you could really do to go anywhere. And also it was being catastrophically shrunk as the government dialed back on the whole idea of giving things to people who needed it. And so I basically said, well, what can I do? I don't know anything about law particularly, but legal secretary, because all I can do is type. So I got a job as a legal secretary on the basis I could do 70 words a minute, and trained on the job as a legal executive. And then I was a legal executive for more than a decade before the writing finally got enough momentum that I could afford to go full time. And that was only a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow, okay. Because I work in law. I work for a solicitors in Manchester. So, though I've been I've been in it for 3 years. 3 years now. I worked in insurance and then went into the legal sector. Finally got myself out of working on chargeable hours. I don't have to do chargeable hours anymore, which is awesome. I hate chargeable hours. But yeah, so who knows? In another 7 years.
You mentioned that it took you quite a while to get into publishing. It was actually publishing. How long did it take, and what was it? Just basically kind of get hammering on the door and waiting to get let in?
15 years of submitting manuscripts and getting nowhere. And every time, and and firmly believing that each manuscript was basically gold dust when I sent it off. And I have gone back through the stacks to see what could be saved, and I have actually saved those things that could be saved, which was really only the last couple of books before Empire in Black and Gold, which was the first one that got in. And beyond that, although I have kind of pirated for ideas, the style is simply not good enough to be worth rewriting. I might as well just start a new book at that point, because it would be an entire book's worth of writing to bring it up to speed. So it's interesting that I look back and think, well, actually, most of the time I wasn't getting anywhere was because I was literally not sending stuff in that was good enough, which is certainly not wasn't my firmly held belief at the time. But there you go.
Well,
if you don't believe that, you wouldn't keep going. If you didn't keep going, you don't get good enough.
It's true. It's true. I mean, it took me a long time. I mean, God, the idea of actually working with an editor and getting an edit and so forth was a shock to the system, because I was very, very convinced about that it was good enough to start with, and I was also very, very loath to basically do more work on a manuscript once I sent it in, both of which are things I've had to unlearn. And as far as writing advice for writers go, that's probably lesson one: is you need to let go of your creations so that other people can make them better.
So how does that work? Do you send it in and they, like when we edit stuff for the website, it's this like, you need to change this isn't good enough? Is it like that? Is it literally them?
There are several layers of it. The first one that gets hold of it is my agent, because I mean the first actual break I got was getting an agent, and then it was quite a while before he was able to place the book, because publishing was basically very busy at that point, and there wasn't really a space for a new fantasy trilogy, particularly in the market. But so the way it normally goes with me, and this is not in any way universal across the board, my agent will generally deal with large-scale structural stuff, and I will generally. I certainly trust his judgment quite happily that I'll make that kind of big change and go back and shuttle things around and cut out large chunks of stuff where he thinks it's being slow. And then the publishers tend to do a series of edits. There'll be a full-on edit which has some larger changes and a lot of smaller changes, and then there'll be a copy edit with smaller changes again, and there'll be a final proof read through, which is hopefully just dotting I's and crossing T's, although I do have a very bad habit of suddenly deciding things will be better at the very 11th hour.
That must make you well thought of at the publishers.
Well, one of the things you get is you get this warning saying if you make too many changes at this final stage, we reserve the right to take money out of your advance, and which is the standard thing. It's never happened, and I think it's a holdover from when these things actually had a physical setting.
Yeah.
Because now everything's on digital. Obviously, the amount of work involved in making these changes is far, far smaller. I mean, it's still there, but it's not the same kind of. You have to go out and move all the little lead letters around the page and however the hell it was originally done. But yes, I mean, I was kind of aware. You have this question, I want to make this change. It will make the book a lot better, but at the same time, I am going to be really getting up to people's noses. And you make the judgment call at that point, and the book always won out for me. But yeah, I'm sure I got sort of cursed at for these sort of last minute sweeping changes.
Was there anything? Have you ever fought tooth and nail for a change that you just didn't want to happen?
I mean, possibly again, I've been fortunate. I've never had to fight tooth and nail. I've fought, but generally, I don't think I've ever had something where I'm absolutely adamant that it is or isn't in, and someone else is adamant otherwise. I think if I feel strongly enough about it, that thus far has carried the day.
Right.
But at the same time, I really, really don't want to become that guy who feels he doesn't need an editor. So I always, even if I do feel that instinctive kickback against something, I always just sit down, maybe give it a bit of time, and come back to it and say, well, look, try and look at it as objectively as possible.
Yeah, it's kind of. I think it's kind of hard. Like Mark's my unofficial editor, so I'll write something and I'll be super proud of it for the website, and then I'll get a message that shouldn't have an apostrophe, or that doesn't make or this shouldn't do this, like
Well,
I mean, and part of you kind of wants to go, no, it's right, and then you kind of go, okay, maybe.
at that kind of level, I was at school at a period of time where they did not teach you grammar. You learned a certain amount of it when you were learning foreign languages, but in English, there was apparently sort of educational policy at the time was that, well, people don't need to learn grammar. This sort of thing is getting less and less important. Who's going to be writing anything in the future anyway? And then, of course, the internet turns up and everyone is reading and writing vastly more than they were before. And I mean, the internet, I suspect there have been studies on the internet as a promoter of literacy, and I suspect it's done a colossal amount in that direction. But it did mean I was coming to the career of a professional writer, not knowing a damn thing about how the language works. And I was very lucky to have as my first editor a chap who might have been the last of the old school, honestly. Peter Lavery, he was my editor for the first few chapters of the Apt books. And I would literally get physical manuscripts marked up in pencil from him in immaculate detail, which took forever to go through. But it taught me all this stuff I really should have known had I had a sort of responsible educational policy when I was growing up. And that helped me polish my style no end.
I do find that actually having a physical copy to read and review and learn from is much more effective than just looking at something on screen. I don't know why that is. I just find it very different.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays I'm kind of happy to have the electronic copy because it's quicker. To work through, and you're not kind of, because I used to have a whole special gizmo to hold the pages I was working on up next to the screen and stuff like that. So I kind of feel I'm happy with electronic now. But my God, I needed those paper edits in the first place. I mean, he really was. He was also, I think, the last of that. I'd go to visit him in London, and get together with him and my agent and whoever his assistants were at the time, and we would do the publishing lunch. Cool. Of basically getting through 8 bottles of wine between 4 of us throughout a Friday afternoon. And as far as I'm aware, that was probably the last instance where that was really done. And it's really, it's like the whole sort of thing that Douglas Adams is talking about in The Hitchhiker's Guide. And it is, I think, a dead practice now, but I did at least get that final sort of last hurrah of it.
So you can still split a participle after and get the apostrophe in the right place after 8 bottles of wine. You finally made it, yeah?
I have to say, there was a turning point for me. Like, I'm dyslexic, so I have English issues when it comes to sort of writing stuff down, which is sad because I love reading, despite having to read things over and over again to make sure it sort of kind of fits into my head. And I love writing things. But I was struggling, especially when I first started the website, with just formulating a paragraph or creating something lucid and readable, something readable. And it was, out of all the time I spent in school, writing papers in my degree and stuff, the one person who taught me the most out of it was a guy who I went to work with when I used to work for Aviva Insurance, and a guy called Chris Roper, he's written his own book actually as well, but he basically took one of my articles and he ripped it to shreds, but in a nice way. He basically took it out of nowhere. He didn't, I barely knew him, and he just said, look man, this is how it was, and he broke down every part and how it should be and why things worked and why it didn't. And literally out of all my education, it clicked. It suddenly just went, I understand now. And it was because he did it in a visual way, and it sort of made things make a bit more sense. Now I make mistakes, as Mark will attest to, but I'm 100% better than I was before. And all it took was somebody to do it in a certain way. And so I try to take these things on board now, because I know that I make mistakes and things like that. And it was just, it was amazing. He gave me a book. It was called, I've got it somewhere upstairs. It's I can't even remember. It's something to do with grammar, but it's got like it's like a play on words. Can't even remember what it is, but it was really helpful as well. And it's just mad that I was like late 20s, early 30s when this all suddenly clicked into place, when really it should have been when I was a teenager, in school.
Well, it's very different now at schools now, because they do teach children grammar and sentence structure and tense. whilst back in my day, it was your handwriting has got to be neat.
Yeah.
I got somewhere in the middle of that, I think, because I'm 43 now. So I actually had some old school teachers who believed you should know stuff around what was on the curriculum. But then I had the weird thing where I did really well at English, but got into computers, and then started writing again about 8 years ago because I was doing writing for work. So now my day job, which is in theory an IT consultant, also involves writing content and documentation and stuff. And I also write in my own time for fun because I'm in the middle of coming out the tail end of NaNoWriMo at the moment with the nervous breakdown. Because I have like 4,000 words left to write before tomorrow. And yesterday I pretty much broke myself. I managed to get about 8,200 words done.
What's the limit? 30,000, did you say?
It's 50,000. You have to achieve 50,000 in 30 days. And I'm currently at about 46, 44, 45, I think. Maybe 46.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I mean, as a writer, I'm generally noted for being prolific and getting a lot of stuff out.
Well, that's what Pete said the first thing when he said he's a very prolific writer.
Anywhere near enough to qualify for a kind of a successful NaNoWriMing, or however you would say it. The amount of words in 1 month is just eye-opening.
The thing is, it's kind of like it's a way of teaching you to stop being afraid of writing, because you quite literally cannot go back and self-edit. The only way to keep... There's some people that actually do NaNoWriMo in a day. They're absolutely insane. I have no idea how much MDMA and speed they take. But they literally, they start at the dot of midnight on the 1st of November, and they get 50,000 words in before midnight. And I don't know how they do it. And I'd hate to try and read it. I'd hate to try and read it afterwards as well.
I'm doing the I'm gonna go in for the World Anvil, which is it's a similar thing, isn't it, to what you're doing?
They've got a similar concept about that. They're looking, but in their case, I think you said it's a race, so it's kind of who gets the most done against overall, rather than being a fits win.
Quantity doesn't equate quality, to be fair.
No,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I as a writer, that sort of thing makes me feel a bit squeamish, because you're going to feel at the end of the day, I'm not quite sure what you get out of that. If you're, especially if you're thrashing it to try and just write more words than everyone else. I mean, there's something stopping you just writing the word a.
Yeah, I think they've got restrictions on it, and it gets checked. I think, from what I understand, they have like the top 10. And then they're red. They go through certain things, and they're red. And they've got different categories for, because we use it for our Dungeons and Dragons on Thursdays for like writing the story, and you've got different sort of sections, so people and history and events and things, and they have like specific. So each one of these has an article, and all the articles together count to your word count, but each article gets checked to make sure that it's entertaining and things like that. So
and not just I am a fish 50,000 times.
Yeah. Well, that's it. There's one of the rules is obviously you can't just do that, and you obviously can't plagiarize.
Adrian, as I understand, your Shadow of the Apt especially was inspired by gaming, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I ran in the 90s a campaign when I was at university, where this world was kind of constructed, and that when I came to base, when I started writing Shadow of the Apt, it was very much with the feel that this is going to be my final big attempt to get published, because obviously, because it had been so long without getting anywhere, and so I went for somewhere that I felt I knew very well, and I could tell stories in very well. And one of the, if you're preparing a campaign world where the players may just hair off in any direction at any time, you do know it generally better than you would know a world you create for a book, where your characters are generally well behaved and go where you want them to. And so that is still the world where I could just go back at any time and write more stuff, because there is so much going on there that I've never had a chance to play with.
Have any other books kind of been inspired by games you've run in the past?
Not specifically. There is, towards the end of the Shadows of the Apt, I was LARPing quite a bit, and there are characters who turn up which are based on friends' LARPing characters.
Oh, nice.
In in sort of very, very in-joke in the name, but also in their kind of nature. And weirdly enough, although that sounds horribly, horribly self-indulgent, it actually added a great deal because it expanded my kind of character range, so that rather than drawing at the same kind of archetypes over and over again, I was working with ideas with input from other people.
The LARPing thing, so it's, I've seen it, I've never taken part, but I was because Pete's done it, and we've been talking about it a lot in the D&D group, so I watched a load of videos on LARP battles and things. Man, that looks awesome. It looks so
when it works well, it's very, very good.
Yeah.
It's and when it doesn't work, it can be profoundly uncomfortable, wet, muddy, and or socially alienating, like everything. But yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of very positive LARP experience, and they on a variety of different levels, it's certainly contributed to the writers.
Yeah, I was chatting to when I was doing some interviews for my BBC article on LARPing. I was speaking to some people at the gathering at Lorien Trust in Locker Park, and they said one of their inspirations for their characters was from characters in Shadows of the Apt. They thought it was a fantastic series of books, and said there's the kin. The animal kin, beast kin in Lorien Trust, and they kind of they loved the kind of their take on the insect version. So the kind of some of the people were being inspired by that. And I said, well, actually, you do know Adrian is actually a bit of a LARPer as well, and their minds were just blown at that point.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I probably owe it to my publisher to point out the Shadows of the Apt books, which are my first ever books fantasy series. They are being re-released this year and on into next year, including for the first time ever in audio. Version of them.
Who's doing the audio? Do you know?
A chap called Ben Allen.
Okay, excellent. And I was understanding as well, when you kind of first had Shadows Out published, you had already had the first 3 books written.
First 4, as it turned out. I mean, well, no, but this is. I mean, honestly, that turned out to be a really good move. I mean, weirdly, I did not mention this fact to my agent because I felt it would seem overly keen. I mean, just another note to aspiring writers: you can't be overly keen in this sort of thing. Saying I have 4 books of this series, they're ready to go as soon as you want them. If they like the first book, that's going to be only good news. So yeah, I mean, it was actually a salient factor in the series finding a publisher, because it meant the publisher knew they could release several books at their own timescale without suddenly finding that, oh yes, the writer has suddenly had a case of writer's block, and there will now be an ellipsis of several years where he sorts himself out. As it was, I just kept writing them before the first book without the 5th book had been written and that kind of thing. So, and I've been kind of living off that head start ever since, to be honest.
Actually, one thing as well I wanted to ask was it always intended to be like a 10-part book series?
I knew the option was there to write a lot of books, 9 or 10.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I also even then I was at least savvy enough to realize that was probably a bit of a big ask for the publisher. Yeah. Although it was very much of the era. The Malazan books were one of the big fantasy properties at the time, so the idea of the huge series of huge books, and Game of Thrones was underway, and that was certainly part of the publishing consciousness. So it wasn't as crazy as it sounded, but I certainly wrote it so the first 4 books are a plot line. And if it had never gone any further than that, that would have been fine. And then the next few books are kind of standalones, exploring, they focus on particular characters and explore aftermath issues. And only really when we were fairly sure that, right, we're now going to get to reach the finish line, was say, fine, I will now write books 8, 9, and 10, which are their own kind of plot arc, bringing it to a conclusion. So perhaps appropriately in a book mostly about insects, it segments nicely into 3 parts.
Deliberately put in cutoff points. So if the worst comes worst, and it did
exactly, yeah. I mean, one of the other, there are definitely, when you're writing, especially a big epic fantasy series, there seem to be 2 schools of thought about how you structure it. As a reader, I do not much enjoy books that do not have an individual shape to them. So you get some books in a fantasy series where it's a slice of the sausage. It doesn't really have a start. It doesn't really have an end. It doesn't have a particular climactic moment. It's just this is more of the story, and that's that works for a lot of readers. It doesn't particularly work for me. And as a writer, I've tried to make sure all of the books have their own story. All of the books have their own payoff at the end, so that at the end of this book, because you don't know however long it's going to be before the next book comes along, At the end of that book, you have a payoff, you have something satisfactory has happened, something has been achieved, and there is obviously you can see where the next book is going to go, but you're not just sort of almost cutting it off in mid-sentence like you sometimes feel that some books do.
So you don't do cliffhangers then?
I don't. As the end of a book, I really try not to, and I'm aware. I know. The cliffhanger as in literally we're getting to the end of the thing, and then the cliffhanger in that, and the thing has happened, and this battle has been won, and this thing has been resolved, and we tried up these things, but look over the horizon, there is a thing, and that second one I certainly do, because I feel that's good writing practice, and you always want to have that breadcrumb trail leading people to the next book, and I do it for books that aren't necessarily going to have a sequel, because I always want to leave myself that door in case it's a possibility. I mean, Children of Time was going to be a pure standalone when it came out, and it was a bit of a punt, and I honestly didn't think it would work as a book, which is, bizarre looking thing how well it's done, but it certainly had that little ... at the end that let me then go on to write Children of Ruin later on.
So, what are your views? Like, do you enjoy George R.R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire books? Because I basically want to lead you on. What do you think about the fact that it's a trick?
I've enjoyed a lot of them, and I have found that they have that thing where at the end of a volume there isn't the payoff, and like I say, I find purely personally as a reader that means I find the book can end quite flatly. They're a remarkable piece of work for the sheer scope and scale, and they've I think the fantasy genre as a whole owed a great deal to the fact the books existed, and they reshaped the landscape at the time, and opened the door to a lot of other books.
What are your views on the fact that he, like, it infuriates me, but I basically, to my chagrin, never heard of George R. R. Martin until a couple of months before the series started, and my sister said they're filming this series in our back garden. So I'm from Northern Ireland, and my parents' house, they were literally filming in the field across the way, and she went, so this series being filmed here, you should read the books. And I was just like, all right. So I got the first one, and I literally couldn't read. I read 5 books in 2.5 weeks, because I literally did not stop. I was on holiday as well, so I literally just sat on in a bench with a parasol over me, because I burn, because I'm Irish and that happens, and I just read for 2 weeks solid, and I was like, this is amazing. And then it's just like, after, what is it, 5 years, 6 years, and there's still The Winds of Winter isn't out. As a writer, do you sympathize that he hasn't finished the book? Do you get to a point where you're just like, I'm totally done, I just can't finish this series yet, I need to do something else? Or
I've never been in that position, but I've never been at the level of pressure that must attend on it. I let's face it, I've never been that successful. But genuinely, the amount of expectation on that series of how it's going to go, even though we've obviously, we've got the TV series, we know how that's gone. It can't go exactly the same way in the books, because the books have, whole sets of extra characters and other things going on. But even then, and I think because of the way that fan base is built up through the TV show, there are a million people, or however many people, wanting that series of books to end, and each one of them knows exactly how it ends, and no two visions of that book are the same. So every version of the books that Martin could write at this stage are going to satisfy a small group of people, and in sense, because it seems to be quite a volatile fan base, incense a vast number of others, no matter where he goes with it. I kind of feel from his point of view, given that he's got other things, he's working on. I know he's very invested in the Wildcards superhero series, which I'm very fond of, for example. And you kind of think, you must get to a point of thinking, well, actually, what will I possibly get out of finishing this series at this point, except vast amounts of vitriol on the internet.
Well, that is very true, to be honest. And I can't lie in that I have sort of preconceptions on how things should go.
I think it's only, especially the long, and especially those, everyone's preconceptions will become more and more rooted the longer the gap is as well. So it's a bit of a vicious circle as well. If it had been a year or 2 years and then the book had come out, there wouldn't have been time, I think, for everyone to decide how things went. And then, of course, there will be the TV show, and the people who like the TV show will want it to be like that, and the people who didn't like the TV show want to be different to that and repair the perceived problems that they felt with the TV. And again, everyone's idea of that will be different. And so, what do you do at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I find the Game of Thrones TV series interesting because this is the only time I know where a TV series has been commissioned on a series of books that hasn't yet been completed.
I don't know.
I don't know.
How did it work with The Expanse?
The Expanse, I think, is finishing. Is literally finishing.
But when the first series was commissioned, were all the books out? I thought
no.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I think the problem is you can't, with especially at the pace TV works, you can't wait.
Yeah.
Because you want to do it while the books are coming out, because that's when your fan base is there. And obviously, as soon as the books are finished, people move on.
Yeah, because I know the Expanse book, like the final one, is being published very soon.
Yeah. So I mean, I suspect it's probably more common than not.
Okay.
I mean, the Witcher books, I think, are still coming out.
I think so.
Writing them? I mean, again, I think that there are different. I mean, with going back to series structure, if you have a series where you know this is an endpoint and that is written, even though the series is still going on, you could aim at that and think, fine, we can end there, and then if it's done really well, we can carry on with the next one. But where you've got a thing where it is just one colossally ambitious epic storyline, like Game of Thrones is, I mean, you just have to kind of leap out, and obviously they caught up with it, and then fine, well, all right, we'll talk with George, get his notes on where he wants it to go, and then we'll do our own version of the last 2 books.
I just can't accept that he said that's how it ends. It just there's no way that a guy who literally kills favorite characters at the drop of a hat is going to end it like the way it was ended, which was ridiculous. It was just, maybe it's just me.
Possibly we'll never know.
Yeah. Well, this is it.
I heard a theory that apparently one of the reasons why the Game of Thrones series was commissioned was so George R. R. Martin could see, well, okay, let's see how these people kind of make it play out. It's like, let's get some ideas.
That's got to be the most expensive way of dealing with writer's block.
Yeah, it's just, I just like, it's it frustrated me that they killed off Littlefinger, because I think he was so instrumental in the entire game. The Game of Thrones is Littlefinger basically pulling the strings from the the shadows and stuff, and for him just to be sort of summarily sort of had his throat cut, with no fun.
I found that fairly satisfying.
Really? I think it's just.
Yeah, I thought he was a very good character. The actor portrayed him brilliantly, but the plot had kind of advanced beyond his own personal ambitions, and giving the character who got him the opportunity to outwit him and defeat him, I thought was very satisfying.
See, because I have massive sort of like for me, I did a massive article on it as well, just sort of saying this is how it's going to end, and Littlefinger's going to be instrumental. And basically, the footnotes of it is that he basically plays everybody off throughout. You think Jon Snow and Dany are basically getting together, or things are going to be good, and then suddenly he kills them, and it's just going to be him. The last scene, even in the series, the last scene should have been Littlefinger sitting on the Iron Throne with a smirk on his face, and then
I do not want to even. I mean, personally, I think I would have been a bit miffed if it had gone that way. But the colossal amount of
internet hate.
rage that would have
Exactly.
prompted would have probably added about 1.5 degrees to the global temperature.
But it would have been remembered though. That's the thing. It's like, even if we just stick with the series as it is, the way it ended, people want to forget it because it was a clusterfuck. You know, it had some good parts, it had some really bad parts, and people are just, you know, it's not really on people's radars.
What was your take on the ending, Adrian?
Me, it's weird. I really liked the last episode, and I really disliked the penultimate episode.
Yeah,
which is a weird thing. There is this trope of woman in power must go crazy that they lent into very, very hard in that penultimate episode. And, you know, because I am, or the profession I am, of course I have my own, well, if I was writing, I would have done this. But that's, you know, it's neither here nor there, and it's not a particularly productive way to go about things. But I do feel that particular trope is very common and very tiresome and problematic, shall we say.
I think it's problematic in that they didn't give it any sort of, you know, there wasn't a lot of sort of signaling towards it. I could buy into her sort of being crazy because of the backstory with her father being pretty much
I mean,
mental.
you could have foreshadowed it more, but I mean, give just once. It would be nice to have a situation. Fine, you know, she's got all that power and so forth, and she maybe does terrible things with it, but she doesn't do terrible things just because a woman having power is inherently a thing that the universe kind of has to erase, and therefore she goes completely stark stereo mad and has to be brought down. Because that does seem to be the go-to.
Yeah,
and that is a bit, you know, it's been done. It's tired.
Yeah, I just couldn't, you know, that thing. Yeah,
one thing I did like was that battle between the Mountain and the Hound.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
That was
Clegg and Ball.
Yeah, that was just suitably epic, and it needed it to be. It needed to be absolutely bombastic, where the towers crashing down around them, because absolute bombast. But it just needed it for those two characters.
Yeah, and I mean I like the Hound as a character, and I mean, it was a series that had a lot of extremely strong actors in, and and none of whose names I can bring to mind at the moment, but they were all very good. But no, that particular performance I really enjoyed.
Well, I mean, just like even like this minor character like Sirio Farrell, which was superbly acted.
Oh God, yes.
And I just really want him like to come in at the final episode and Spitty Wong, what do we say to the god of death? Absolutely, just like.
Yeah, I mean that was. I mean, weirdly, that is someone I have met. I've done conventions with him. He's a lovely chap. But
I interviewed him once, because there was a lot of the Game of Thrones, so like James Madden, and there was a lot of them on stage, and I was one of the my co-host at the time was trying to was asking me questions. So I had asked him a question, and he went off and he was talking about sword fighting and things like this, and I sort of kind of zoned into what this other guy was saying. And he basically asked me a question, and I completely ignored him because I wasn't paying attention. So everybody's laughing at me and he's sort of laughing. And I look around, and everybody's just laughing, and I'm just like, okay, so, and I move on. And he didn't say anything, and I was just like, okay. But yes, lovely guy, really lovely guy. Yeah, I hated the way they just sort of voted, like democracy suddenly just came in, and Bran was voted in as the king, and it's just like, what? Come on.
I mean, I quite like the way it ended, although I've got to say, you kind of wonder, well, all right, that's fine. You are solving the problem by putting it off for a few years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you kind of hope that the more level heads can kind of get some sort of functioning infrastructure work in place before Bran pops it. But
and also, I mean, you won't have the White Walkers kind of marching onto you just at the same time. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember feeling that, all right, given where we are at the beginning of the final episode, that's a fairly satisfactory way of bringing it to a close. Everyone kind of got their bit. No one got completely let off the hook. I could have asked for a bit more for Grey Worm, maybe.
Yeah,
but
you just
I
sort
mean,
of left.
at this point, we are basically just those guys on the internet saying, "Well, if I, this is how I would have done it," and it's, you got to take what the series does, and you can like it or not. But it's faffling over that kind of detail. I think it's not healthy.
Yeah, I suppose it's loads of series falling afoul of internet rage. There's not very many that come out unscathed.
Look at certain Star Wars series at the moment.
Well, Star Wars is the other one that has that sort of enormously volatile fan base at the moment.
Oh God. Yeah. Should we start you on the Star Wars films now, Matt?
No, we'll just.
You need to take a break.
No, we'll. Well, I can talk about it if you want to talk about it, but I'm just sort of, I just thought it was a good swan song. The last, the end of it was good. It was quite emotional for me, as I've talked many times on many podcasts about it. I loved the last one simply because it was the end of an era. It was just like that. My basically childhood, from small boy to adulthood ended. That was it, sort of. And as much as I hated, well, I didn't hate, as much as I disliked The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker sort of, for me, fixed some of the issues I had and ended well and sort of got me quite emotional. So, I thought it was quite good. And just like the other, I've never been down on the originals. Jar Jar Binks isn't great. Young Anakin is a bit of a pain in the ass. But as films, I think they have some of the best lightsaber battles. Some of the set action pieces are really good. And I've never understood the pure hate that they've got. And I enjoyed them when I watched them when I was sort of teenage years.
Proto nerd rage, you see. It wasn't quite what everyone expected.
Yeah.
And so everyone clashed out. And they didn't have the internet as we have it now.
Yeah.
To thrash it out, so everyone just agreed that they hated it for some reason.
Yeah, so and it's like even the Last Jedi, which I just couldn't grasp. It annoyed me in a lot of ways. I didn't hate, I enjoyed it because it was a Star Wars film. It was just there were certain parts in it which didn't didn't sort of sit with me in how that should be. Like Luke Skywalker should be.
I think you and I obviously have basically diametrically opposed likes and dislikes on this one. So
no,
it's probably best to leave it there.
Did you
that way?
What are you watching at the moment, Adrian?
Oh, God, I have just finished a rewatch of the old HBO series Carnival.
Oh, I keep meaning to watch that.
It's brilliant. It's again. I mean, it's another, to a certain extent, another victim of story meets studio, because they very obviously needed 3 series and they got 2, and they did their level best with it and produced an extremely good series with some phenomenal performances. But you kind of feel they needed more time. But also, I mean, honestly, it must have been insane, given how much period of detail they put in there. It must have been insanely expensive to make.
Carnival's quite old. Well, how old is Carnival? Because I remember it being...
It's early 2000s, 2003 maybe.
Yeah. About 15 years, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was coming out at about the same time I think Game of Thrones was starting, and
2003,
Deadwood.
2005.
Yeah, Deadwood was the other one.
2005. The joy of Google.
Yeah, it's really good. Actually, it's really interesting. It's very, very kind of Clive Barker-y sort of 1930s depression set, sort of supernatural Americana. I've just watched last night the first episode of a program that in the UK is called Fort Salem, and I think it's called something different in America.
Oh, with the witches.
Yeah, we said the first episode.
I've been meaning to catch that. Yeah, I've been meaning to catch that one, I must admit. But so much other stuff going on. It's the problem these days, isn't it? Especially with if you have Netflix and Prime and Disney Plus.
Mate, I get basically the chance to watch an episode of something of an evening with my wife, and then there are a couple of shows we watch as a family, like Star Trek Discovery and Dark Materials, and other than that I just don't get the time.
Yeah.
So where do you stand on Star Trek Discovery from the
I love it.
Where do you
it is my favorite Star Trek.
Oh,
how did you find the first season?
The first season I enjoyed once they kind of got through the large amounts of Klingon.
Yeah.
They get to about midway through the first season. They get to a point where the Klingon sound is starting to sound natural and easy, whereas there's a lot of long Klingon-filled scenes where the language is it doesn't sound like people speaking in a native language, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's just the characteristics of the language. It's a very harsh and abrupt language, but there's a lot of Klingon in there, and you kind of understand why most films would basically just switch to English at some point.
There's the Star Trek 6 thing, wasn't they, where they started out in Klingon, and they did the sweeping camera thing, and everyone was suddenly speaking English to stop it from being so.
I think that's sometimes, but we love the whole family love the first season, and we've continued to love it. I think the third season is doing some remarkably fun things that managed to be simultaneously very Star Trek and also very new, which is quite a feat.
I really enjoyed Star Discovery, but I haven't been able to get myself into the newest series. I watched one episode and was like, it's not.
You have to push through the first two sometimes.
Yeah,
this one, I've heard that from a lot of people. They got to 2 or 3, and it clicked for them. I think, and now we're into 5.
I still haven't seen Picard yet. Still haven't seen Picard.
What?
Still haven't seen it.
What?
I haven't got around to it, but there was people who were kind of going, it's just not, and I was like, oh, I love Generations and the Next Generation, and I didn't want
Picard's not a series; it's a film chunked up.
Yeah.
So if you treat it as that, it does. Some of the episodes feel uneven because the 3 set stages of the story are spread across the episodes.
All right. Okay.
So it's like what Adrian was saying, where you have some books where it feels unsatisfying because it doesn't have a payoff.
Yep.
It's just serving a series, but you have to wait 6 months, 8 months for another one.
Right.
With Picard, you were waiting a week, but that was long enough for some people to get their knickers in a twist.
Right. in the land of binge watching. So that's the thing. That's another thing. I find myself sort of waiting until it's been on so I can binge watch. So Mr. Robot, I hammered that. Like I just left it, and then I just hammered it, and I got through it only a month ago. I'm not sure if I like the ending or not, but it was a good series, very good series. And it's the same like with The Mandalorian. Okay, I waited for 4 episodes before I watched it and stuff, but man, that's awesome. The Mandalorian's so good.
I'm waiting for the whole second series to come out before renewing my Disney Plus and watching that.
Yeah, it's good though.
My kiddies will not let me wait until it's all out. We've been sitting down pretty much every Friday night and watching The Mandalorian, and I'm not giving away any spoilers. But yeah, they were just bouncing up and down the latest episode and just pointing out all the different connectivities between this and Rebels and Star Wars and everything else, and they're absolutely loving it. And to be fair, so am I.
Yeah.
To be fair, I couldn't bear to wait until the end of it because I just know that I'd get like spoiler to death and just go insane. I've got friends that have the same problem. They're like, they literally will say to all their mates, "Please don't say anything or put a spoiler warning up." Because I don't get to watch it till Sunday because they work. And you see, like on Saturday morning, they're like, right, a lot of you, fuck you all, I hate you.
Yeah, it's definitely they've done really well. Jon Favreau is killing it at the minute. Did you watch is it the archives or the galleries or something like that? The series they did around behind the scenes of the first season. No,
where they have all the round tables. I really would recommend that. There's some really good bits in there. There's a really nice bit. I think it's like the 4th or the 5th episode where Dave Filoni is talking about how he sees the films based on obviously the time he spent working with George Lucas, and he gets to the end and everyone's just like, well, there's nothing more we can say now, is there? You've just done it.
I think I feel bad for George Lucas. Is another person who I feel bad for. I remember I was going to write a defense of George Lucas many moons ago, before actually the news 3 came out, simply because he created Star Wars and people treat him like shit. I know he changed things and some of the things weren't great, but he's the father of the thing that you love, and you're basically treating him like shit. And it annoyed me. It always really annoyed me that I didn't think the original the prequel trilogy was brilliant, but it's still Star Wars. It's still something that he created, and he has the right to make changes and things. And it's just You know,
Well, on the plus side, he's done all right out of it.
yeah, well, that's it. You know,
I
he'll
suspect he's
cry
not
himself
hurting.
to sleep in his bed of millions, but he'll, you know, it's just one of those things. One thing that sort of annoys me about geek culture is that there is a lot of what's the word? There's a lot of
entitlement issues.
Yeah, and it's just sort of it can get quite toxic sometimes.
Yeah,
you see
well,
it.
that's. I mean, I think Star Wars is one of the areas where that's perhaps the most obvious because of for whatever reason. Although, I mean, if you talk to people who are in things like Doctor Who fandom has been quite sort of spiky for quite a long time. Not to the same scale, but it's been there, and God knows comics fandom is there. And I think you're right. There seems to be something about that kind of. I think it goes from being a fan of something to very intensely identifying with that thing to basically taking ownership of the thing. And then when someone is doing something that you don't like with a thing that you feel ownership for, it can make people extremely territorial.
Yeah.
Wasn't there that thing that was said where they said, we want more of that thing? No, we don't want that. We want something new. No, we don't want something that new. We want something a bit like the old stuff.
Yeah.
That's too much like the old stuff. No, do it a bit different. No, that's too new. Just to stop.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is it's the passage of time. You're going from a period when you were absolutely the target audience for such and such a thing, and now you're 20 years older, and this is Star Wars and Doctor Who both, and suddenly they're producing it again, but they're producing it for the equivalent of the target audience. They're not producing it for a 40-year-old guy with a 9-to-5 job who has extremely rose-tinted memories of what things were like back when they were 12. They're producing it for kids who are 12, and therefore, amazingly, that the 40-year-old person, well, it's not as good as when it was in my day. Monsters were proper rubber monsters in my day.
Yeah, well, that's my friend, who, to be honest, he changed his mind about the Last Jedi. We both I've only seen it once, and I have never seen it again because I was that disappointed with it. But he said, you need to watch it again, man, because of this, and this. But he basically came back to me and he said, you gotta look at it this way, man. It's like, this isn't for us. This is for kids, like you said. It isn't for, they're not making it to sort of carry on, this legacy for the adults, for the kids who are now adults. It's for this new generation, and and it's true. We had Ewoks who, if you think about it, are ridiculous. The most ridiculous thing. And we got so many happy memories about these things. And then there's like CGI Gungans and everybody's kicking off, and it's just like, well, that's their thing. That's their Ewoks. And
when I've seen this sort of pop culture thing produced where you can kind of feel it is specifically being produced as fan service to that older generation of fans. I mean, that almost never seems to work because people are never happy with anything, and you can't please even a small amount of the people most of the time. But B, I always feel that the art itself suffers from having to do all of these gurning winks to the audience, say, hey, you remember that? That's like that other thing we did 30 years ago. And I think that if you are in that cleft stick of, well, we have to do a thing that is both new and exactly the same, you've got to go for the new. And that, I mean, this is where I think the new series, the recent current series of Discovery is knocking it out of the park, because they've absolutely embraced, fine, we're doing Star Trek, we're doing it completely differently.
I think you do get, like, The Mandalorian has a lot of sort of, it's old school in feel with a new edge to it, but I think it does quite well because it nods to things but sort of seems to progress the story quite well. I think
it's whether that nod is just that little tiny tip of the hat, or whether it is that enormous look the audience in the eye and give them a great big slow wink.
To be honest, sometimes I really like that. Like,
but the problem is anyone who is not in that tiny demographic they are playing fan service to is then sitting thinking, well, I didn't get that, but apparently they were spending a lot of time over making it really important that I noticed it.
I mean, one that actually did that quite well. Have you seen any of Lower Decks?
No, I have not.
That actually, I came at that because I wanted to see what it was like because everyone was talking about it, but I was convinced I wasn't going to like it. but I found I did, and I found that actually it was very clever, especially all the way through, but especially the last episode, with the with certain guest stars and so on. They did really good job of. They had that slow wink, but in such a way that you knew they were kind of laughing at it at the same time. There's a scene where they have like this whole cache of stuff they go through trying to find weapons because they're caught in a bad situation from someone who's smuggling. And one of the things that falls out is, do you remember back in the 60s they had that whole thing with Star Wars merchandise where Star Trek merchandise where it's whatever they could rebadge.
Yeah.
And there was a Spock's helmet.
Yeah.
Spock's space helmet with the big light on the top and things like that. And they have one of those fall out, and there's some guy saying, "This isn't very Star Trek." You know, and it's just little things like that. And someone running off with Sulu's rapier to go and fight something off and things like that. And it just became. I found that I was really surprised from not expecting to be the target market, to finding that because the people who are making it were from our age group, but were targeting the newer people, they could get the balance right when they occasionally stick things in. But it's such a hair
it is, yeah, it's absolutely doable. But I feel kind of erring on the side of the new rather than erring on the side of just raking the nostalgia, because if all you're doing is raking the nostalgia, you're not that's literally all you're doing. Whereas if you're making something new, you've got the chance that you're making you're making the memories for a new generation rather than just playing up to us oldies.
Yeah. I do like when they play up to me, and it's just like, and I will bang on. I will say this till I die. Rogue One, one of the favorite Star Wars films ever, and some of the nods they had in that literally just made me.
Okay, I will absolutely agree with you with Rogue One.
Yeah, Rogue One.
That's our no man's land that we can shake hands over on
yes.
Star Wars.
I
love, but weirdly enough, I loved it for exactly the other reasons. To the reason that you love it, and maybe that shows that film absolutely walked that line perfectly.
No, the reason I like that film was because it's not about Jedis, it's about regular people, and there's a very grey area. I love the fact that the rebels are kind of darker, and they do things that they that probably like I've explained this numerous times on these podcasts, but it's like it's basically you've got these rebels who are portrayed as whiter than white throughout all of these things. This is pure good, but they're not. There's darkness behind them, and they do things that they're not sort of proud of. And I love that, and I love the fact that it doesn't have bar Darth Vader at the end, which is just amazing. This sort of it's about regular soldiers. It's a war film.
That's why I love. That's exactly why I love that.
Yeah,
show. And that's also why I love the first season of The Mandalorian. I'd say I haven't seen any of the second season yet. I'm a bit leery about the vague thing. Oh yes, in this season of Mandalorian, we're bringing in these 3 established Star Wars characters. I'm thinking that
it's done very well.
Yeah, because I think you have the danger that that's just going to dilute the good stuff in it. I mean, I get asked occasionally, well, what franchises would you like to write for? There are a lot of franchises I would like to write for. The reason I will never be allowed to write for them is because I would only ever want to do that kind of story. I don't want to write about any of the established characters. I want to talk about the universe. I love the Star Wars universe. It has so much potential. It has so much going on. I would like to do what The Mandalorian has done, just go off to a small corner of that universe and do some stuff and tell some stories that don't have to ever involve the name Skywalker or any other actual character that everyone is so invested in. And I think one of the reasons The Mandalorian works so well and has been so beloved is because they haven't tried to mess with that great big central pool where everyone's conflicted ideas about where it should go are based. You go out to literally the outer rim of the Star Wars universe, both physically and philosophically, you can tell stories and people aren't going to get really pissed at you.
I have a feeling it's going to get sucked into, time.
That's what I was worried about. That's what I'm worried about, to be honest, because the idea, I think the more you then try and rope it into the core Star Wars thing, the less it will be what people like about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've got a theory that it's basically the side quest character. You've got the main quest happening off to the side, off over there, and he's the Mandalorian following his own quest, and basically his job is look after this child.
Yeah.
And I think, and like, yeah, that's.
But it's weird. It's a bit like so I'm an inveterate World of Warcraft player.
No way.
I'm
13 years sober. 13 years sober.
Yeah, no, I've literally, the amount of back-to-back time I have spent playing that game is soul withering. But one of the things you get with Warcraft storylines is there is the stuff you do as your character, and every so often the main plot will turn up, and it will usually involve these great big monolithic slabs of NPCs turning up who are the big people, and they will turn up and they will usually act with the emotional maturity of a 13-year-old, and they will throw their toys out of the pram and make great big decisions, and you as the foot soldier sitting there thinking, this is dumbass, why am I just standing here? Why am I now going to kill your 18 guys because you've told me to, despite the fact that what you're doing is patently nonsense? And I think you've got the same thing with any big franchise. As soon as the big characters hove into view, their gravitic pull will completely rob your new characters of any agency.
I mean, it seems to me from looking at it and from some of the discussion about potential other programs that will spin off, what they seem to have quite got right is this idea that the main core of the Skywalker saga is this big ongoing sort of like beam of light, but he's kind of spiraling around the outside, and every now and again he just deflects off the outside.
Yeah.
And
But I mean, it's a tightrope walk to get that right. And again, I mean, left my own personal view, purely my own personal view, is absolutely, if in doubt, pull away from the light.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Poltergeist wise.
They've also been lucky with the team they've assembled. When you look at the directors, and Filoni and Favreau are lucky in that they have the knowledge, but they also have the, how should I put this? They have the weight to be able to say no when people are being silly. You know, because Favreau's got all his time he put into the indie side of things and Marvel. Filoni has the weight that comes from all the time he spent and how well he did the Clone Wars and all the time he spent around Lucas. And so between them, they seem to have that good balance of the geek, the Star Wars nerd, and the executive that can say, that's a really stupid idea, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so just purely from the first series, they've absolutely nailed it 100%, I think. So let's hope it continues to be so.
Yeah, well, you know, so 4 episodes in, and it's awesome. You know, it's really good. So
also with the second episode, they're using a lot of the Ralph McQuarrie stuff, but not like the big stuff. They're using little things to help it feel like old school Star Wars without having to invest too much in the old characters. So you get lots of images that people recognise that are of that age.
What I wanted to ask as well is, you mentioned World of Warcraft and playing it massively. Have you ever wanted to write for it?
Well, this is the thing. All the World of Warcraft writing that I'm aware of, and I might be completely wrong on this, is all to do with those main characters. I mean, in fact, what they've done, they've made some slightly odd decisions about doing major plot stuff, not in the game, but between games in the books, which is a weird decision for a very interactive medium. I would love to write in the world of Warcraft, but I would not in any way want to write stories about any of those main characters, because I kind of feel it's been done, and I don't like, you know, if I'm a world building first writer. I feel that what science fiction and fantasy have to offer that are specifically unique to those genres are the worlds they create. I think those are the things that people love and the things that people come back to. I would love to write stuff set in the world of Azeroth or Draenor or wherever else. I just wouldn't want to ever touch on the main plot. And the problem is that's not what they would want me or anyone to do, because they have books that have specific purposes. So Christy Golden, who does, I think, most of their big profile books, is obviously writing to a thing, well, we need these things to happen in your book involving these characters, because that's effectively the connective tissue stitching this expansion to that expansion.
What I ask as well is, when you're first writing a book, what comes first? Is it plot? Is it world? Is it character?
With me, it's always world.
Okay.
And that, which is, I think, quite unusual for writing. But the way I find it, I want to write stories, tell stories about a world.
Yeah.
And I will construct that world, and then when I know what the world is like, the interesting stories inherent in that world will make themselves apparent to me. The characters will arise out of the details of that world. It's like setting a machine in motion, which will then produce the other things, because assuming I've done my homework at the start, just through a kind of logical inference.
So you set the conditions for the experiment, and
Yeah.
what comes out at the other end of it is inherently part of it, rather than you having to jiggery pokery and wedge stuff and chop bits off so that it'll all fit together.
Absolutely that, yeah. And it also means that it means that a lot of things happen that I wouldn't necessarily have thought of if I just sat down and thought, well, I'm going to have a plot where this happened and then this happened and then this happens, because the world effectively gets in the way. And that can't happen because the world doesn't work like that. Therefore, there must be some other thing that happens, and it keeps it fresh and it keeps it interesting.
How much? I mean, I suspect I might know the answer to this, but how much do you plan your novels in advance? To what level of degree of?
I plan everything in advance except for how it's going to end.
Okay. That's interesting.
So how does that work then? So is it just something? Is it just inspiration? Is it something at the end just go, this is how it's going to end? Or
by the time I get to the end, I'll get to the point where I'll probably know like who is going to be there character wise, the particular kind of flashpoint that's going to evolve, but how that actually resolves, I leave to the momentum of the book when it gets there, because the book will have a particular trajectory at that point, which will tell me how that scene has to finish, based on all the things that have happened up to that point.
It sounds
so far that's not let me down. I'm sure there'll become at some point where I'll get to the end and think, well, I don't know.
I mean, that sounds like a variant on something we discussed with we had someone that I know through friends who's a comic book writer. And I jokingly said, because I was just starting NaNoWriMo at the time, that a lot of people have this whole thing that they discuss where they say that they start a story and then the characters go off where they want to and drag them along whether they like it or not. And he said he'd done a workshop with one of the big Marvel editors, and he said that's absolutely the best kind of stories, where even if you plan it one way, if the story drags you that way and you don't follow it, then the story comes out worse because it feels
I'll back that 100%. I mean, you do, even though I plan, you still find that actually this is the better way, and it is very much like, you find actually this character wouldn't do that. Or, I mean, and sometimes this is simply that I haven't planned it well enough. And I haven't. The thing is, you think a lot about the start of a book and you think a lot towards the end of the book, but the middle, it can be a bit of an undiscovered territory. And frequently, when I go astray, it is usually from about chapter 7. If I can get past chapter 7, everything's fine. I know I'm doing it right.
I don't know. I try to write down like our Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I'm trying to sort of create this world anvil thing as it goes along, and they do some interesting things, and you're just like, would your character do that? Our cleric's turned into basically a murder hobo out of nowhere, and then there's lots of arguments between Draken, who's Pete's character, about murdering captives and things. It's like, I'm just like, and I have to stop sometimes and go, will your character do that? As your character is this, and this, would your character do this? Like, who were you arguing with? You were arguing with me the other day. What was it? Because you wanted to kill somebody. I was like, would he actually kill them because he's defenseless and he wouldn't? Who was it? It wasn't the Mind Mage. You tried to.
The Mind Mage. He was defending.
He was defending the Mind Mage.
I wanted to attack the what turned out to be the succubus, because she was sat there quite happily and everyone else was under control. I thought, something.
That was it. I was like, but she's undefended. She has no weapons, and you're just going to attack her out of nowhere. And I was just like, but that's not what your character would do. And then there's always the argument. It's like, but that's not what they are. But then it's like, do you have to just let them free just to do what they're going to do? But yeah.
Do you get much sense to do much gaming, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I can. I mean, it's I'm involved in 4 kind of ongoing games at the moment.
Wow.
Well, it's honestly it's been a lockdown thing, because it's suddenly the idea of gaming online, which is always fairly unappealing, as sort of go, it's not happening that way. It's not happening at all. So I'm running a couple of games and I'm playing in a couple of games, and they've all been very subject to availability. And God knows, I've had some edits over the last 10 days, which have pretty much soaked up all of my spare time. But yeah, theoretically, I'm gaming probably more now than I have in quite a long time.
How do you find your groups work? Are they idiots, or do they or do they do what they're meant to do?
I like to think I curate my players very, very.
What games are you playing, by the way?
So I'm playing the world's stupidest monk in a 5th edition game. Well, basically, I worked out. Well, all right. A monk's dump stats are intelligence, charisma. So I'm absolutely going to lean into that really, really hard. I'm playing in a game of Shadowrun.
Right.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I'm running a game of Root based on the kind of the Kickstarter rule set. It is based on the world set up in the board game of the same name, and it's about delightful woodland animals murdering each other. And that's that I'm running that, and that's gone extremely well. It's set up so that it's very kind of free and easy. You're telling very kind of picaresque sort of stories with a band of vagabonds wandering about, playing various factions within this forest against each other, and that's gone very nicely. And
Went in the Wilderness by way of Quentin Tarantino.
kind of, I mean, maybe not quite. I mean, it's almost Wind in the Willows by way of sort of Jack Vance's Cudgel Saga, kind of thing. But and then I've just finished a game of Legacy: Life Amongst the Ruins, and I'm just about to start a superhero game also using the Powered by the Apocalypse type rules.
Wow, our Dungeons and Dragons game takes up most of my life. I don't even know how you can do that and play World of Warcraft. Wow, how many characters do you have in World of Warcraft? Although I've dabbled with various alternatives, I really had the same main character since I picked up the game about 14 years ago. Sorry, because I could never understand. I'm always a warrior, and I was always I couldn't get any more characters. It's like everybody was running around with 5 fully leveled sort of characters. It's like, I can barely level this guy. How are you getting 5 characters with all that armor? I just do not have enough time in the day to do this.
See, I never got into World of Warcraft. It never clicked for me, but I used to be hooked on City of Heroes and City of Villains.
Oh yeah,
and that's how I learned about All Titus, because it was like, oh, but you and you could, but if you try, and, oh wow, that's really shiny. What's he?
Oh man, World of Warcraft's like crack. I had to end that one. That relationship was something I needed to leave, because it was literally, I was spending all my time in the game, being bored. If I was bored, I'd just be bored in the game. If I remember my sort of epiphany moment was I was in what's I can't even remember. It begins with an O. It's the one that's got like this sort of like beam of light. It was like I can't even, Ogmar or something. I can't remember what it's called. But basically, I was in that city, and I was flying around in my Griffin, bored, and I was there for about an hour and a half. And I went, why am I doing this? And it just clicked with me. It says, I need to leave this game now, because it's affecting everything. I was just like, right. So, and I deleted the game and my character the next day. And I haven't looked back since. As much as I've been really wanting to try it again, I was like, no, I need to leave that shit alone.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to get into, I mean, I at least on and off, I've basically been in raiding guilds, and I found that's been a very positive source of sort of social interaction.
Yeah.
And I got to know a lot, but also I tend to have this thing where, I mean, the new expansion has just dropped, so I've been playing it a lot. And this is why these edits turn at a particularly awkward time, because I haven't been playing it anywhere near as much as I would have liked to have been playing it. But I'll play it and then eventually you get to the point, right, I've done the stuff, and then you'll fall back into, fine, this is the little daily grind I have to do to keep earning things. But I find that's a really useful mental unwind time, because by that time it's all known. You kind of know exactly what you're doing. It's not terribly challenging. It's a matter, you sit down, you potter about, you chat with people while you're killing your 18 orcs or whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, and then that's about an hour in an evening. That's really useful kind of decompression time.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing Star Wars Squadrons a fair bit online with a bunch of mates, and like from university, and basically 5 of us would get together, form a squadron up, and just go and shoot up Empire. Shoot up some TIE fighters. But it's just relaxing, it's calming. as much as it can be flying an X-wing. But you're just hanging out with your mates and chatting and like just screaming out, look, I suppose, in an attack position.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Tuesday.
The social side of thing is definitely a big pull. Like the one thing that kept me in World of Warcraft was because I had a lot of very close friends in there, and I'm still friends with them now. But it was just sort of, it was eating every other part of my life up, and I was just getting to the point where it was just like I couldn't deal with it anymore, and I had to just make a decision. And there's a lot of drama as well I found in guilds, because ours was a competitive raiding guild, and it just got really sort of bitchy, and that was another...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I couldn't do the sort of very, very competitive raiding I used to do way back. The guild I'm in at the moment is considerably more laid back. It's one evening a week raiding rather than 3, because which I couldn't do time wise, but also I just don't think I'd have the mental endurance for. Because I've burned out and gone and just left the game for sort of 6 months at a time in the past because of that.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy being just going along at the level where you kind of feel you're achieving stuff, and then you get all the camaraderie, but at the same time you don't feel that, because I haven't spent 19 hours achieving this one thing to give me an extra 0.05% damage, then I'm really letting the side down and that kind of stuff. So.
The grind, man. The grind.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally I've been kind of tempted by EVE Online, like the spreadsheets and starships, and then I hear about the amount of time you need to invest in it every week, and thinking, nope.
Yeah.
No, I have a life.
My dad used to play that, and he just said it was like it took up so much of his time. And I like those concepts. I like games where it's like they're so in depth like that. Like you got Elite Dangerous and even like what's the new one, Star Citizen.
Well, to be fair, that's still not come out yet.
I'm going to say that doesn't. That's going to turn up sometime after the end of.
Well, do you know what? One of my best mates, his wife is HR for the company that they're based in Cheadle Hulme, and or Withington, and she's HR and she's just been hired, and I'm kind of thinking it's either because they need to let everybody know that they're fired and there's not going to be any game, or they just hired a load of new people because they need to finish this thing off. But
the amount of money they clock in every month, I'm pretty sure soon that they're just going to do a hostile takeover of the UK. Because their GNP will be higher than ours by the time that next year's finished and Brexit. Yeah,
well, that's it. Bit of a random one. You sort of talked about, you like world building and you want to be outside of them. You like franchises, but you want to be outside of them. Have you read much of the Warhammer 40k, 30k Black Library stuff at all?
I think I'm allowed to say that I have recently written for 40k Black Library. I've got a short story turning up in an upcoming Inferno collection. And we've got some other stuff we're working on. So,
great!
Are you allowed to say what it's about or give any hints? Subject to NDAs.
I think I mean it's 40k rather than Sigmar, and it's Gene Stealer cults.
Okay.
Ooh, I do like a good Gene Stealer cult story.
Yeah, I mean the weird thing, basically last year at the Birmingham Games Expo, they had releasing a lot of the Gene Stealer cult stuff, and they had a lot of the art up.
The old school stuff.
There was some art from the faction book, absolutely beautiful art, which basically it's showing effectively a failed Gene Stealer cult interaction. And I don't know what the intent was from what the artist's brief was or whatever, but to me, you're looking at all these kind of the Space Marines and the Adeptus Mechanicus, Skitarii and so forth, and doing all the sort of shooting into the crowd and so forth. And from my eyes, this is like, it is very obvious who are the good guys in this scenario, and it's not the Imperium. And for that, I thought, right, I'm going to try and write a sympathetic story about the Gene Stealer cult if it kills me.
Wow, no way! That sounds amazing. That sounds so good.
That must be the hard sell as well.
It's a bit of a. Having then read the book, it is a bit of a hard sell, but we'll see.
Wow.
Okay,
Holy shit!
I want to read that. Yeah,
because the thing is, the whole thing about oh man, because the Gene Stealers cult have a really good sort of their background in that they sort of believe that they're sort of infected by this sort of like the Tyranid
devotion.
Yeah, and
that,
you know
that love and devotion, that community-minded insectoid.
Yeah, but the thing is, they don't realize that they're just food. They will be food for the Tyranids when they come in, and they're in their mind they're doing it for their sort of their species and for this greater power that's going to come down. And well, that's going to be an interesting.
What was the action by Black Library when you handed in your manuscript?
There's a lot of. I mean, this is because this was my first franchise work. This is for the short story, and Games Workshop are extremely serious about the consistency of their IP. So we had a lot of edits, and we went back and forwards a lot of times. Because it had to be absolutely in line both with the details of what had gone before, but also just the ethos. I mean, I did get my favorite ever editing note.
Go on.
I was writing about agricultural worlds.
Yeah.
And someone had come to this agricultural world, and this was sort of kind of a grim, mushroom-growing, horrible agricultural world. And it was just throw line again, not like there's not like the green fields and rolling hills and so forth you expect. And I got this note saying, no, all of the agricultural world are horrible. This is the world of Warhammer 40k. Everything is nasty and bad.
I think as much as everybody sort of it hates Games Workshop for being money grabbing, they're a big company, but their backstory there, there
are a huge number of people involved in Games Workshop who absolutely love the worlds and the characters and the factions and so forth. They're the huge amount of devotion there.
Yeah,
what impresses me with Games Workshop is the Warhammer 40k universe and Fantasy universe. It's one of the most incredibly detailed game universes that I know of. I mean, if you look at the first edition of Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, it's about 70% of it is purely backstory and background.
Yeah. I was really quite disappointed. I thought it was going to be a role-playing game when it came out rather than a war game. And honestly, you kind of the material provided there, you could basically have just run a role-playing game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think originally it was designed almost as a kind of small-scale skirmish role-play game.
Yeah.
They just kind of realised that people were trying to write bigger games.
What are you doing, Mark, by the way? What are you doing? What are you fixing?
Oh, there was a problem with... I installed a new video card earlier on, and it was throwing its toys out the pram. It wanted a confirmation code for something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you were organising things mid-podcast.
But as we were off track there. Yeah, I mean, so how did this kind of whole come about? This writing for Black Library.
In this case, I actually contacted them. Like I said, because of this, I got quite inspired by the whole Gene Stealer stuff that I saw at the Birmingham Expo. Went off, got hold of the book.
Games Expo.
Sorry?
Was that
the UK Games Expo? Yeah. Right. And I just thought, actually, I would really like to write that story, or have a go at writing that story. So, I just came to just getting hold of the relevant people and sending them a pitch.
Oh, nice.
I am really. When is it released? Do you have a?
I'm not sure. The thing with obviously the whole situation we're in at the now, the release dates are all over the place. But it was going to be early next year, and may well still be early next year because I don't think Games Workshop have kind of slowed too much.
No.
Yeah. In their schedules.
Yeah. How was 2020 and COVID-19 and the whole shit show 2020 kind of affected you and your writing?
I mean, honestly, I have been very productive because that's my way of escaping thinking about what's going on.
Fair point. Yeah.
Other writers I know have found it extremely hard to write for exactly the same reason. It seems to hit people one way or the other. But I mean, God knows, writing has always been an escape for me, and it's an outlet for me to just vent my frustrations sometimes. And so, I probably got more done than I would normally have got done in the equivalent period of time. Just because, it's a matter of you bury your head in it to a certain extent.
Yeah, I had my kiddies were off school from March until September, and so basically a lot of my writing just went straight down because I was basically being dad whilst Kaylee worked upstairs, because she was working from home. But yeah, it's basically, and I found my taste change. Like before, in February time, January February time, I was loving Kingdom, that Korean period zombie drama, which is all about a deadly plague of zombies sweeping across, Korea. Now, don't really want to watch it too much at the moment. For some reason, it's kind of lost the taste for it.
Yeah.
So it's like, have you had kind of similar interactions? Like, have your tastes caused almost change because of COVID?
I don't think I've had any ideas which have been sort of imperiled by what's gone on. I know writers who have, and I'm sure there have been a whole flotilla of writers who've had sort of epidemic themed books and so forth being finished when all this is kicked off, and that must be a real problem, because you think, well, do I or don't I? And there's going to be, I suspect, an absolute, exactly that. And I suspect out of that glut, there will probably be one really interesting genre book, probably more dealing with the idea of social isolation than actual disease.
Yeah.
There will be one probably really interesting mainstream lit book, and there will be a million other books all jostling for room, talking about plagues. And it's not I'm absolutely not suddenly leaping in to do, hey, I'm going to write this plague book, because it's
you get lost in the crowd.
You'll get lost in the crowd, but also B, this is a real thing that real people are really going through, and may well have lost people too, and all been very ill, and they probably don't want it per se. There is, science fiction and fantasy is all about being socially relevant, or certainly has the potential to be very social relevant. It's also there to be escapism, and sometimes sometimes the escapism is what people will be looking for.
Just a quick one for you. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you work away. You far away.
So obviously, when you write for this sort of genre, you usually do it because you love it. Is there a guilty pleasure book that you go back to, or an author you go back to that you discovered growing up, and you find you go back to sometimes because you like going back over their work, or you just like to re-experience that particular story?
I don't know. The whole concept of the guilty pleasure, I think, is a little problematic in and of itself. There's nothing that my reading taste, for example, have definitely changed. Okay. I find that I can't necessarily read a straight up sort of epic fantasy narrative in the way I used to, unless it's doing something interesting. So, for example, I absolutely love Jen Williams' Ninth Reign series, and I absolutely love R.J. Barker's work, because they are doing interesting things with the genre. But I don't think I could sit down and read another book about another prince, right? Killing another Dark Lord or anything like that. Just not because there's anything inherently wrong with it, but just because I've read enough of those books that I need something new. I need the new idea. I need the interesting world or the interesting take, and then I'm all over it. But if it's just that, I guess I don't do comfort reading in that sense, because I think comfort reading in that sense does not actually feed the part of my mind that reads.
Have you read any Richard Morgan's Land Fit for Heroes?
No, I've certainly read some. I've read some Morgan. I've obviously read the Altered Carbon.
Yeah, they're great. Richard Morgan was his take on the fantasy genre, and being Richard Morgan, it was very grim dark, and it was basically like you got the battle against the scale folk. This is the consequences of it. So you basically got like heroes, PTSD, and it really does give you like an interesting perspective on what would happen to all the heroes after the battle. I fought some truly horrific wars. Yeah, and it's actually really.
Well, that's one certainly since the from kind of the mid to late 90s, when fantasy did kind of turn more towards the grimdark. I think the best enduring legacy of all of that is that it's added that whole extra dimension. That, I mean, not that there weren't books dealing with that previously, but certainly it's made it much more front and center. The idea that it's not all about that very polarized morality and that very simple story of good and evil, and it's to do it's the idea that just because you're a character in a fantasy world doesn't mean you can't actually also be a real person.
Did you read much of David Gimmel's work? Like Druss and I mean, I read everything he wrote pretty much. I absolutely loved it. I learned a great deal from it. I mean, I think Knights of Dark Renown is probably still my favorite of his.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's one of his he really didn't like, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I think that you wouldn't have. He's one of those writers that you absolutely wouldn't have the fantasy genre in the current position it is now without him.
Yeah,
you can certainly. I mean, if you I know it's there in my work, and I think you can see it in Abercrombie's work and so forth. That's definitely part of the foundations. One of the giant shoulders we're all standing on.
Talking about Abercrombie, my boss, who is perpetually sort of going, "Have you read this book? Have you read this book? Have you read this book?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "You need to get that book. You need to get that." He's got me to download audiobooks for The Blade itself and the other books by Abercrombie. I'm initially starting. I've only started listening to it. It's quite hard reading. Well, listening, because there's a lot of information going on. But yeah,
he's a phenomenal writer. I mean, when you get to Heroes, which is kind of I think it's Best Served Cold and Heroes actually, particularly, which are like books 4 and 5 in that sequence.
Yeah,
are superb, and I think Heroes is a genuine masterpiece.
Wow. Okay.
What are you reading at the moment, Adrian?
I'm reading R.J. Barker, Call of the Bone Ships.
Oh yeah, I've heard good things about that actually.
I mean, the Bone Ships is one of my favorite fantasies of all time, purely because of the really interesting ideas that have gone into the world. I mean, it's beautifully written. The story is very good. It's kind of epic naval fantasy, which is not a thing that's often done. It does it extremely well. But just so it's naval fantasy involving lots of battle between big ships on a world where there are no trees and there is no wood.
Oh, okay.
And he does the thing that I think world building needs to do, is he explores the implications of the changes he has made to the world.
Wow.
All the way through. And every single part of it is just steeped in the idea that everything here logically hangs together, and it is a very different world to anything that has existed in history.
I've got another. It's another set of books that he's recommended me for. To be honest, he's generally quite good. He started me off on Pierce Brown's The Red Rising saga, which is amazing. It was really, really good. I'm looking forward to book 6. But he's pointed me. Have you ever heard of Peter Klein's? It's called X Heroes. At all? Oh no, is my internet gone down? Ooh no. Sorry, my OBS after so long, the OBS decided to die after an hour and a half. I was going to say, have you heard of I've kind of lost his name. Peter Klein's.
Yeah, I was so. Based on what we just said, I don't know. I know the name.
Yeah.
I do not know if I'm now linking it with the right book. Because I'm thinking of a book where it's a world where there are superheroes, but there's also like the world is full of zombies.
Yes, it's that one. It's that one.
It is that one. So I've read X Heroes.
It's called X Heroes. He said to me, it's like that. Yeah.
Yet.
So I've got those. It's another recommend. So I've got to go through those as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to them. It's getting the time to do it, because I usually sort of I read a lot when I'm on holiday, or if I'm on the train, or if I'm traveling and things, but because I'm not traveling anywhere, I'm not going anywhere, it's audiobooks. So when I'm painting my 40k stuff and things, I put my audiobooks.
I'm a big fan of audiobooks.
Yeah, audiobooks.
I've been very lucky. All of my audio readers have done extremely well.
I find with audiobooks, I can listen to podcasts no problem when I'm walking about doing things. But audiobooks need more attention for some reason. I don't know why, but it's using a different part of my brain.
I seem to be able to pick them up and put them down even very, very, very quick. I can listen for 5 minutes, and then I always seem to remember where I am when I pick it up again. So,
Okay.
I mean, I just started Ready Player 2 on Audible, because I quite enjoyed the first book. And I've also found that it depends for me who's doing the narration. Will Wheaton's doing Ready Player 2. I find him very engaging. I'm partway through the Enterprise incident on the Discovery, from the Discovery books, as an audiobook, which is kind of like a prequel to where the Enterprise was when it meets Discovery. And I find that much harder work because the guy who's doing the voiceover doing the reading for it, he's very, even when he's trying to be expressive, he doesn't really change the tone of his voice.
Yeah.
He changes the timbre of it. And I find that I need to put more attention into it because it all sort of mushes together.
A good reader absolutely makes or breaks on audiobooks. I mean, I've given up on audiobooks. I mean, I tend to listen to audiobooks on books I've already read rather than ones that are completely new to me. And I've given up on ones where I really enjoyed the book because, even sometimes because the reader is actually putting too much into it. So there's one book where there were a number of non-human characters, and the reader was going to town on giving those characters the most ear-gratingly inhuman voices they possibly could, and it just made the listening experience basically intolerable. But yeah, I mean, it's reading an audiobook is an art. It's an art form, and I am sufficiently self-indulgent that I always listen to the audiobooks of my own work because I like to hear someone else interpreting it. It is you're getting someone else's take on the characters and how they sound.
I like Jonathan Keeble. I'm basically, if Jonathan Keeble, if the 40K book, or sorry, the Horus Heresy books, which I quite like listening to. If it's not Jonathan Keeble, I'm not interested. It has to be Jonathan Keeble. It's like he's my go-to guy when it comes to audiobooks. But you're bang on about sort of audio. They make or break a book. Like Red Rising at the start, I just wasn't buying into it just because the guy had this really ridiculous sort of Irish accent. As much as the characters within it are meant to be descended from Irish and stuff, it just didn't fit in my sort of mind on how it should be. And I was so close to just going, yeah, I'm not buying into this. But the character changes and he changed with it. And it got a lot better from that point on. But at the start, I was just like, yeah, I'm not buying into this sort of really Irish accent that you're putting on. It's not really doing it for me. And luckily he changed and made it sort of it got better. But I totally buy into that. It's I like a lot of history books, so I listen to so one of my favorite historians is Tom Holland, and I listen to a lot of his audiobooks, and he always has quite good narrators, sort of art, what's the word, narrating his books. But I was listening to an old school history book, the Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire by I can't even remember the guy's name. A well-known historian. Gibbon, yes, it is Gibbon. Yeah, that was it. And it has got the worst narrator ever. It just makes an extremely dense book. That little book, this audio, and it's just like, this. I want to listen to it just so I can sort of kind of do a bit of learning. But it's just like, yeah, it's killing me. I can't do it. It's just so dry. I know it's a dry book, but it's like, the guys reading it doesn't make it any better. It's just like, oof. Yeah. Right. Okay. That's that lull. I think we'll leave it there.
Okay.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Really, really interesting. Actually, one more thing before we go, because it'll be very remiss of me not to ask how if people are trying to learn, who want to write a book, who want to be novelists, who want to create, what's their best in? How do they do it? What's the?
I mean, the problem is I'm now sufficiently long enough in the tooth that the industry has kind of moved on, because when I was getting published, it was trad or nothing, and now there are various other ways. There's a lot, and I'm not in any way qualified to talk about things like self-publishing because I've never done it.
Oh, okay.
The trad publishing route is certainly still there, and it's a matter of polishing your manuscript as best as you can, sending it off to agents and editors that you've researched to make sure they're taking on new stuff and that they actually publish the sort of thing that you're writing, and hoping that you hook them in your sample chapters that they want to see more.
Yeah. Cool.
That's what worked for me. But like I say, the methods of getting published have certainly broadened since then.
Yeah, I would go to writing conventions such as EdgeLit and others. Basically, go there, meet people, learn from the workshops, go to the panels.
The caveat, so I never did that before I got published. I've only ever been to conventions as a writer.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad.
Okay.
Because I am supremely socially awkward when I do not know where I fit. And I was insanely desperate to get published, and I would have made such a nuisance of myself being completely unable to talk to people in the civilized fashion that I would have been blacklisted throughout the industry. So I think, writing courses, conventions, writers groups, your mileage may vary. Your best idea is to take stock of the sort of person you are and the sort of writer you are, and what tools are therefore going to best fit you. But if you are, as I was, a supremely socially awkward and also powerfully self-opinionated and conceited person, turning up with your dog-eared manuscript trying to force it on editors is probably not going to do you any favors.
True. But I will say one thing, Mark, I'll always go back to this one workshop that I did at my first Edit, Mark Shadbourne's The Business of Writing. And that pretty much set in motion my entire writing career, where I ditched engineering and I'm now a freelance journo and writer. So, yeah, I mean, they are worth going, but as you say, don't be a dick.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There's your nugget of truth right there. Don't be a dick, and you'll go far. Which I think it's just general. Anyway, so we've frozen out just before it goes. We'll wait for it to do its thing. Sorry, but literally just before we're going to end, that's when OBS. Well, it looks like it's not an internet issue. It's an OBS issue. Anyway, so we're just going to have to carry on. We're going to leave it now. It was good. We had a good run without an OBS messing up. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, Adrian. It's really appreciated. It was super interesting. And I'm really looking forward to that Gene Scaler cult book. So hopefully... Story, yes, sorry, the story. So yes, for tonight, I've been Matt Geary. With me has been Peter Ray Allison.
Take care, everyone.
Mark Canty.
Look after yourself, people. Be safe.
And Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.